The great chamber buzzed with the sound of 47 different alien voices. Each species had their own way of speaking, but the universal translators made sure everyone could understand each other. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up and up toward a domed ceiling covered in stars. Ambassador Dae-ho Kim sat quietly in the human section. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen many years of peace talks. His hands were folded in his lap as he listened to the angry voices around him. He had been humanity's voice in this council for 20 years, and he could feel that today would be different. Today felt like an ending. Veltar of the Nexian Empire stood up first. He was tall and made of what looked like living crystal that sparkled in the chamber's light. When he moved, tiny rainbows danced across the walls, but his voice was cold and hard. "The humans have become too dangerous," Veltar said, his crystal body flashing red with anger. "They build too many ships. They make too many weapons. They grow too strong too fast. This threatens the peace we have kept for thousands of years." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Dae-ho felt his heart sink, but his face showed nothing. Next to him, Ambassador Kira Yoon sat like a statue. She was the human military representative, a woman who had fought in 3 wars to protect alien colonies from pirates and raiders. Her uniform was covered with medals from grateful alien governments, but today those same governments were turning against her people. Thexara of the Voidborn Collective rose next. She looked like a shadow with glowing purple eyes, her form shifting and flowing like smoke. "The humans interfere too much," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "They give advanced technology to primitive species. They help weak civilizations become strong. They do not respect the natural order of things. They think every species should be equal." More voices joined in. Each alien representative had a complaint about humanity. The humans explored too much. They asked too many questions. They helped too many struggling worlds. They refused to accept that some species were meant to be weak while others were meant to rule. Dr. Hannah Park, the human science advisor, wrote down every word in her notebook. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. For 15 years, she had shared human medical knowledge with alien doctors, helping them cure diseases that had killed millions. Now those same aliens were saying humans were too generous with their knowledge. "They share their technology freely," complained Ambassador Zol of the Mantid Hives, his insect-like features clicking with irritation. "They do not make other species pay proper tribute. They do not demand submission. This disrupts our economy and our hierarchies." Captain Jong-Soo Han, the human Space Force commander, listened to aliens complain about human protection services. For decades, human ships had patrolled dangerous space routes, keeping trade lanes safe from pirates and monsters. Human soldiers had died protecting alien cargo ships and passenger vessels. Now the aliens were saying this protection was unwanted interference. The accusations went on for hours. Humans were too curious about ancient ruins and forbidden knowledge. They were too willing to help refugee species find new homes. They were too quick to offer aid during natural disasters. They treated all alien species as equals instead of recognizing the established order where stronger species ruled weaker ones. Elder Quindus, of the ancient harmony finally, stood to deliver what everyone knew would be the final judgment. He was incredibly old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His skin was like tree bark and his eyes glowed with ancient wisdom. Many species considered him the wisest being in the galaxy. "The human species has repeatedly violated the galactic preservation protocols," he said in a voice like distant thunder. "They upset the natural balance. They give hope to species that should accept their place as servants. They make the weak believe they can become strong. They make the ruled believe they can become rulers. This cannot continue." The chamber fell silent. Every alien representative leaned forward to hear the formal judgment. "We vote for immediate quarantine of all human worlds. We vote for termination of human membership in this council. We vote for complete separation between humanity and galactic civilization. Let them live alone in their own space, away from civilized species." Dae-ho Kim slowly stood up. The chamber became even quieter, if that was possible. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the air recycling systems. Dae-ho looked around the room, meeting the eyes of representatives from species that humans had helped, protected, and befriended for over a century. He saw Ambassador Keltar of the Zephyrian Republic, whose people had been saved from famine by human agricultural experts. He saw Minister Vorthak of the Altarian colonies, whose cities were built using human engineering. He saw countless aliens who owed their lives, their prosperity, or their freedom to human help. All of them avoided his gaze. "We understand the Council's position," Deho said quietly. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics, reaching every seat. "Humanity accepts your decision. We will not argue. We will not appeal. We will not beg you to reconsider." He paused, letting his words sink in. Some of the alien representatives looked uncomfortable now, as if they had expected humans to fight back, to argue, to make a scene that would justify their decision. "We will comply with your ruling completely," Deho continued. "We will remove all human presence from galactic space. We will take back all human technology and knowledge. We will stop all aid programs and protection services. We will leave your civilization exactly as it was before humans arrived." Another pause. The silence stretched longer this time. "We will not contest this ruling. We will not send protests or appeals. We will not try to contact any of you again. We will leave silently." With that, Deho gathered his papers and walked toward the exit. Kira Yoon and Hana Park followed him, their footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. None of them looked back. The vote was called immediately after the humans left. 46 species voted in favor of human expulsion. 0 voted against. 0 abstained. It was unanimous among the non-human members. As the alien representatives filed out of the chamber, many of them felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. They had gotten what they wanted. The humans were gone. The dangerous, interfering, equality-loving humans would no longer disrupt the natural order of things. But something felt wrong. The chamber seemed smaller somehow, emptier. The conversation seemed duller. The very air felt different without the 3 humans who had sat quietly in their section for so many years. Elder Quindus remained in his seat long after the others had left, staring at the empty human section. In all his centuries of life, he had never seen a species accept defeat so calmly. Most would have raged, threatened, pleaded, or bargained. The humans had simply agreed. For the first time since the vote, Quindus wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. But the deed was done. The humans had accepted their exile with dignity and grace. Soon the galaxy would learn exactly what that meant. 6 months had passed since the Council's vote, and the galaxy watched in growing confusion as humanity began what they called the silent departure. It was not the angry, destructive withdrawal that many aliens had expected. Instead, it was methodical, professional, and strangely polite. Admiral Jinwoo Lee stood on the bridge of the massive command ship floating near New Sol Station in the Alpha Centauri system. Through the viewport, he could see hundreds of human ships moving in perfect formation, each one carrying families, equipment, and memories away from homes they had built over generations. This was the largest moving operation in galactic history, and Jinwoo was determined to make it flawless. "Status report," he called to his staff. Captain So Young Choi looked up from her command console. She had spent the last 3 months coordinating the evacuation of human colonies spread across 847 star systems. Her screen showed a complex web of moving ships, timing schedules, and resource allocation that would have impressed even the most organized alien civilizations. "Sector 7 evacuation is complete, sir," she reported. "All human personnel and equipment removed from the Colonian trade routes. Sector 8 will be finished by tomorrow. No incidents, no delays, no complaints from local alien authorities." Jinwoo nodded. That was important. The humans were leaving, but they were doing it properly. Every piece of human-owned equipment was being carefully removed. Every human-built structure was being politely returned to local alien governments. Every contract was being legally terminated with proper notice. Dr. Subin Kang approached the Admiral with a tablet full of data. She was in charge of technology retrieval, and her job was perhaps the most complex of all. For over a century, humans had shared their knowledge freely with alien civilizations. Now all of that knowledge had to come back. "The medical equipment withdrawal from the Zephyrian hospitals is causing some problems," she reported. "Their doctors are asking if we can leave the cancer treatment machines. They say they don't know how to build new ones." "What did you tell them?" Jinwoo asked. "I gave them the same answer we give everyone. The Council voted for complete separation. That means complete, no exceptions." Jinwoo looked out at the stars and sighed. He had helped design those cancer treatment machines. They had saved millions of Zephyrian lives over the past 20 years. But the Council had been very clear. Humans were too dangerous to work with. Humans interfered too much. so humans would stop interfering completely. "Sir," Captain So-Young called out, "I'm getting urgent messages from the Zephyrian Republic. Their agricultural yield has dropped by 60% since Commander Taman Park's farming teams withdrew. They're asking if we can make an exception just for food production." Admiral Jin Woo remembered Commander Taman Park well. He was a quiet man who had spent 15 years developing new soil treatment methods for drought-stricken Zephyrian colonies. His techniques had turned barren wastelands into fertile farmlands. Entire Zephyrian cities depended on the food grown using his methods. "No exceptions," Jinwoo said firmly. "Forward their message to Ambassador Daeho. He can explain the Council's decision to them." Across the galaxy, engineer Yujin Nam was leading teams in the careful dismantling of human-built infrastructure. She stood on the observation deck of Station Harmony, watching as her crews methodically removed the fusion reactors that powered the massive space station. The station housed representatives from 12 different species and served as a major diplomatic hub. "Ma'am," called out her assistant, "the station manager is here again. He wants to talk to you about the power systems." Yujin turned to see a worried-looking alien approaching. Manager Vextar was a member of the Crystalline Consortium, and his mineral body was flickering with stress patterns that even humans could recognize. "Engineer Nam," he said, his voice tight with worry, "you cannot remove all the power systems. The station will lose life support. Thousands of beings will die." Yujin pulled out her tablet and showed him the engineering diagrams. "These are the original station plans from before human involvement. Your people can restore the old power systems. They're less efficient and less reliable, but they will keep the station running." "But we don't remember how to build those old systems," Vextar pleaded. "It's been 50 years since we needed them. The knowledge has been lost." "I'm sorry," Yujin said gently. "The Council voted for separation. We cannot leave any human technology behind. That includes our power systems, our communication arrays, and our life support improvements." As her crews worked, Yujin watched alien engineers trying to understand the human designs. What the aliens didn't realize was how interconnected everything had become. The humans hadn't just installed better power systems. They had redesigned the entire station to work as one integrated whole. Every component depended on every other component in ways that seemed impossible to alien minds. The fusion reactors weren't just power sources. They were connected to the water recycling systems, which were connected to the air purification systems, which were connected to the gravity generators, which were connected back to the reactors. Remove any piece and the whole system would become unstable. But the Council had voted. Complete separation meant complete separation. Meanwhile, logistics coordinator Mi-jung Seo was publishing daily reports that were being read throughout the galaxy. Her job was to track the withdrawal progress and keep everyone informed. Each report was professional, detailed, and completely emotionless. She documented the removal of human teachers from alien schools, human doctors from alien hospitals, human engineers from alien construction projects. The reports were terrifying in their thoroughness. Every day, another piece of galactic civilization lost its human component. Trade routes that had been safe for decades suddenly became dangerous as human patrol ships withdrew. Communication networks that had connected distant worlds went silent as human technicians took their equipment and left. What made the reports even more disturbing was their tone. There was no anger, no bitterness, no threats. Mi-jung wrote about the collapse of interstellar commerce with the same calm professionalism that she might use to describe the weather. She documented the failure of alien infrastructure with scientific detachment, day 184 of withdrawal operations. She wrote in her latest report, "Human agricultural advisors have completed their departure from the mantid hive worlds. Local food production is expected to decline by 40–60% over the next growing season. The mantid authorities have requested technical documentation for human farming methods. Request denied per Council separation protocols. Day 185 of withdrawal operations. Human peacekeeping forces have withdrawn from the disputed border regions between the Calarian and Proximi territories. Both species have formally requested human mediation services to prevent armed conflict. Request denied per Council separation protocols." The reports went on, each entry documenting another way that human withdrawal was affecting galactic civilization. But still, the humans refused all requests to stay, all offers to reconsider, all attempts at negotiation. Former allies sent desperate messages to Ambassador Deho, begging him to ignore the Council's vote and maintain at least some human presence. The old man's responses were always the same, always polite, always final. "The Council has spoken," he would say. "Humanity respects your decision. We will not interfere with your civilization any longer." Some alien governments tried to go around the official channels. They offered individual humans huge payments to stay and keep working. They offered human colonies special protection if they would remain in galactic space. They offered to ignore the Council's vote if humans would just continue providing essential services. Every offer was politely declined. Captain Eun-young received dozens of such offers as she prepared to withdraw her anti-piracy fleet from the outer trade routes. For 20 years, her ships had kept merchant vessels safe from raiders and space monsters. Her fleet had rescued thousands of alien crews from disasters. Her tactical innovations had revolutionized space combat. But when the Colonian Trade Federation offered her an entire planet as payment for staying, she simply shook her head. "The Council voted for us to leave," she told the desperate Colonian ambassador. "We are leaving. Find another way to protect your ships." As the months passed, it became clear that the human withdrawal was not just thorough, it was absolute. No human would accept any alien offer to stay. No human would break ranks with their species' decision. No human would ignore their government's orders to evacuate. The galaxy was getting exactly what it had asked for. A universe completely free of human interference. Many alien leaders were beginning to suspect they would regret getting their wish. 1 year after humanity's complete withdrawal beyond the galactic rim, the first serious cracks in galactic civilization became impossible to ignore. What had seemed like minor inconveniences during the human departure were now revealing themselves as fundamental weaknesses that threatened the stability of entire star. Systems Trade Coordinator Hyun-soo Bae had been responsible for managing commercial shipping routes between 23 different species. From his office on Earth's new colony world beyond the galaxy's edge, he could monitor the old trade networks through long-range sensors. What he saw would have been amusing if it weren't so tragic. The Colonian Trade Federation was hemorrhaging money and ships. Their merchant vessels, which had traveled safely through dangerous space for decades under human protection, were now disappearing at an alarming rate. Pirate attacks that had been virtually eliminated were now daily occurrences. Captain Eun-jung had maintained order in those sectors with a fleet of just 30 ships, and a reputation that made even the most ruthless pirates think twice about attacking merchant vessels. Her anti-piracy task force had been more effective than armies 10 times its size, because everyone in the galaxy knew that attacking a ship under human protection meant facing consequences that were swift, certain, and final. Without that protection, the pirates were having a celebration. The trade routes that connected the inner and outer regions of the galaxy were becoming war zones. Merchant ships traveled in heavily armed convoys that moved slowly and cost fortunes to operate. Many routes were being abandoned entirely as too dangerous to use. But trade disruption was just the beginning. Dr. Sang-hyuk Yu had left behind detailed medical databases when the humans withdrew. But the alien physicians who tried to use human-developed treatments were discovering that they had fundamentally misunderstood how human medicine worked. The plague that swept through the Altarian colonies was a perfect example. It was a disease that humans had dealt with easily for 30 years. The treatment protocols were clearly documented in the medical databases that Dr. Sang-hyuk had provided before leaving. The cure was simple. A combination of 3 common medications given in a specific sequence over 5 days. But when Altarian doctors tried to follow the human protocols, patients kept dying. They had the right medicines and the right dosages, but they didn't understand the underlying principles that made the treatment work. Human medicine wasn't just about following instructions. It was about understanding biological systems in ways that required intuitive leaps that other species couldn't. Dr. Sang-hyuk had spent decades learning to see patterns in disease progression that seemed invisible to alien doctors. He could look at a patient's symptoms and immediately know not just what was wrong, but how the disease would progress, what complications to watch for, and how to adjust treatment for individual variations. Without that intuitive understanding, the documented treatments were just lists of chemicals that didn't work. The plague spread across 6 Altarian worlds before burning itself out. killing nearly 2 million beings who could have been easily saved if Dr. Sang-hyuk had still been there. Master Engineer Won-ho Jang had designed the atmospheric processors that kept Station Harmony habitable for multiple species, with different breathing requirements. When the system began failing 6 months after human withdrawal, alien engineers confidently opened up the maintenance panels, certain that they could handle a simple repair job. What they found was a nightmare of interconnected systems that seemed to defy logic. Every component was connected to every other component in ways that made no sense, according to conventional engineering principles. The air purification system was somehow tied to the gravity generators. The water recycling plant was connected to the communication arrays. The waste disposal system was integrated with the power distribution network. Human engineering didn't just solve problems. It solved multiple problems simultaneously, with elegant solutions that achieved maximum efficiency by treating the entire station as a single, living organism. But that meant when any component failed, the engineers needed to understand how the failure would affect every other system. The alien engineers didn't have that understanding. They tried to repair individual components without realizing that each fix would cause problems elsewhere. The more they tried to help, the worse things became. Eventually, the entire station had to be evacuated. When the life support systems failed completely, the Nexian Empire faced rebellion in their outer territories when General Byung-jun Moon's peacekeeping forces were no longer available to mediate disputes. For 40 years, human peacekeepers had served as neutral arbitrators in hundreds of conflicts. Their reputation for fairness and their refusal to take sides had made them the galaxy's preferred diplomatic mediators. Without human mediation, old grudges that had been dormant for decades began to resurface. The Calarian Proximy War erupted after 600 years of peace, when a border dispute that would have taken General Byung-jun a week to resolve escalated into armed conflict. Both sides had trusted human judgment because humans had no stake in the outcome, and no history of favoring one alien species over another. But the other aliens couldn't fill that role. Every non-human species had ancient alliances, old enemies, and cultural biases that made them unsuitable as neutral mediators. The Nexians couldn't mediate between the Calarians and Proximus because they had territorial disputes with both species. The Voidborn couldn't help because they had religious conflicts with anyone who didn't share their philosophy of cosmic unity. Only humans had been truly neutral, treating all alien species as equally worthy of protection and respect. Without that neutrality, diplomatic solutions became impossible to achieve. Economic analyst Do-Yun Soo watched from humanity's new home beyond the galactic rim as market after market collapsed. The human consumer base had comprised 12% of the galactic economy, but their spending had supported much more than 12% of economic activity. Humans had been the galaxy's most adventurous consumers, willing to try new products, visit dangerous tourist destinations, and support art and culture from species they had never heard of. Luxury goods manufacturers had built their entire business models around human customers who collected alien artifacts, bought exotic foods, and commissioned custom artwork from dozens of different species. Without human buyers, the market for non-essential goods virtually disappeared. The tourism industry was devastated. Humans had been known throughout the galaxy for their curiosity and their willingness to experience alien cultures. They would travel to dangerous worlds just to see unusual rock formations. They would spend fortunes to attend alien cultural festivals. They would risk their lives to explore ancient ruins that other species considered too boring or too scary to visit. Human tourists had supported entire planetary economies. The crystal caves of Nexia, the floating cities of void space, the underwater hotels of Aquatica, all of these tourist destinations had been built primarily for human visitors who found them fascinating. Without humans, these exotic locations became expensive monuments to their own irrelevance. But the most devastating loss was the disappearance of human innovation. Research Director Jae-wook Ryu had led joint scientific initiatives with 43 different species, and his approach to research had revolutionized galactic science. Where alien scientists tended to specialize in narrow fields and follow established procedures, humans had a talent for making unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. Human scientists would combine biology with physics, engineering with psychology, mathematics with art. They would look at problems from angles that hadn't occurred to anyone else. They would question basic assumptions that other species had accepted for thousands of years. Without human creativity, technological advancement in the galaxy slowed to a crawl. Alien scientists kept working on the same old problems in the same old ways. They made incremental improvements to existing technology, but the revolutionary breakthroughs that had characterized the era of human involvement became increasingly rare. The Council tried to maintain its regular operations, but even basic governmental functions became less efficient without human organizational expertise. Administrative Chief Minna Kim had managed the Council's bureaucracy for 30 years, streamlining procedures and eliminating redundancies that had plagued galactic government for millennia. Without her systematic approach to administration, the Council's meetings became longer and less productive. Simple decisions that had once taken hours now took days. Complex legislation that had once passed smoothly through the bureaucratic process now became bogged down in endless committees and procedural disputes. The aliens were discovering that humans hadn't just been helpful neighbors. They had been the invisible foundation that supported galactic civilization in ways that no one had understood until it was too late. And the humans remained completely silent about the growing crisis, maintaining their polite distance while the galaxy slowly fell apart around the empty spaces where humanity used to be. 3 years after the human exodus, galactic civilization was dying. What had started as minor inconveniences had become cascading failures that threatened the survival of entire species. The Galactic Council, now meeting in emergency session almost constantly, authorized the formation of a human replacement initiative in a desperate attempt to artificially recreate the capabilities that humanity had provided. Supreme Chancellor Nexar of the Galactic Council stood before the reduced assembly. Only 31 species remained active members, down from the original 47. The others had either collapsed internally, withdrawn from galactic affairs, or simply stopped responding to communications. "We must face the truth," Chancellor Nexar announced, his crystalline voice cracking with stress. "Our civilization is failing. We need to systematically replace every function that humans performed, or we will not survive another decade." The Voidborn Collective volunteered to recreate human humanitarian aid programs. Ambassador Thexara, whose shadow form flickered with determination, led the first mission to assist the struggling colonies of the Outer Rim. These were primitive species that humans had been helping to develop agriculture and basic technology. The mission was a disaster from the beginning. Volunteer coordinator Sungmin Ko had possessed an almost supernatural ability to understand exactly what each struggling civilization needed. He would arrive on a planet, spend a few days observing and talking to the locals, and then implement solutions that seemed to anticipate problems before they arose. The Voidborn, despite their good intentions, approached aid work like a mathematical equation. They analyzed resource requirements, calculated optimal distribution methods, and implemented standardized assistance protocols. But they couldn't understand the subtle cultural factors that made some solutions work, while others failed catastrophically. On the agricultural world of Rim 7, the Voidborn provided advanced farming equipment that the locals couldn't operate or maintain. Songmin would have started with simple hand tools and gradually introduced more complex technology as the farmers developed the skills to use them. The expensive equipment sat unused while crops failed and people went hungry. On the mining colony of Asteroid Base 12, the Voidborn established efficient resource extraction procedures that maximized output but destroyed the miners' traditional social structures. Sungmin would have worked with the existing community leaders and found ways to improve productivity while respecting local customs. Instead, the colony descended into civil war as different factions fought over the disrupted resource distribution. The humanitarian aid missions became so counterproductive that several worlds formally requested that the Voidborn stop helping them. It was the first time in galactic history that anyone had ever refused humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, the military situation was becoming desperate. The destroyer swarms in the galactic south had consumed 3 entire civilizations and showed no signs of stopping. These biomechanical horrors reproduced by consuming organic matter and converting it into more warriors. They were the galaxy's oldest nightmare, held in check for centuries by defensive strategies that no one really understood. Military Strategic Advisor Ye-Jin Huang had developed those defensive doctrines through decades of studying destroyer behavior. Her strategies seemed simple on the surface: maintain defensive positions at specific distances, use certain types of weapons in carefully timed sequences, never pursue retreating swarms beyond designated boundaries. But when alien commanders tried to implement her tactics without her guidance, they discovered that the strategies only worked when every detail was executed perfectly. Ye-Jin had understood destroyer psychology in ways that seemed impossible. She could predict their attack patterns, anticipate their tactical responses, and identify the exact moments when defensive positions should advance or retreat. Without her intuitive grasp of how the swarms thought and moved, her written strategies became useless lists of instructions that didn't account for the infinite variations of real combat. The 7th Fleet of the Altarian Defense Force followed Ye-Jin's protocols exactly when they engaged a destroyer swarm near the Beacon Nebula. They maintained the specified distances, used the recommended weapons, and executed every documented procedure perfectly. The entire fleet was destroyed in less than 6 hours. The swarms began advancing toward the galactic core with nothing to stop them. Panic spread through the inner worlds as species that had felt secure for millennia suddenly faced the possibility of extinction. The medical crisis was equally devastating. The ancient Harmony attempted to recreate human medical techniques by training their best physicians in human documented procedures. But they quickly discovered that human medicine relied on more than just technical knowledge. Dr. Heiwan Cha had saved entire species from genetic diseases through approaches that seemed impossible to other races. She would look at a patient's symptoms and somehow see patterns that led to treatments that shouldn't have worked, according to conventional medical theory. Her success rate had been so high that other doctors had stopped questioning her methods and simply trusted her judgment. But Dr. Heiwan's intuitive understanding of biological systems couldn't be taught from textbooks. When alien doctors tried to replicate her genetic therapies, they achieved less than a 20% success rate with treatments that had been nearly 100% effective in her hands. The Colonian medical crisis exemplified the problem. A genetic plague was spreading through their colonies, and the documented human treatment required precise modifications to the patient's DNA. The treatment protocols were clearly written, the equipment was properly calibrated, and the alien doctors followed every step exactly as described. But 9 out of 10 patients died anyway because the alien physicians couldn't make the subtle adjustments that Dr. Heiwan would have done instinctively. Trade networks that had once been models of efficiency became chaotic disasters. Supply chain coordinator Bok Yisong had created logistic systems so elegant that other species had never realized their complexity. Her algorithms for routing cargo ships, managing inventory, and coordinating deliveries across multiple star systems had seemed like simple computer programs. But when alien logistics specialists tried to operate those systems, they discovered that the programs required constant human oversight to function properly. The algorithms made assumptions about shipping priorities, cargo compatibility, and route safety that only worked when human judgment was available to handle exceptions and unusual circumstances. Without that judgment, the automated systems began making decisions that seemed logical but were actually catastrophic. A cargo ship carrying medical supplies to a plague-stricken world was rerouted to deliver luxury goods to a resort planet because the computer calculated that the luxury delivery had a higher profit margin. Another ship carrying food to a starving colony was delayed for 3 weeks because the system couldn't process an unusual customs requirement. The elegant efficiency of human-designed logistics became a nightmare of algorithmic stupidity. The Council's repeated attempts to contact humanity were met with polite but increasingly brief responses from communications. Director Young Hoan, he would acknowledge their messages, express sympathy for their difficulties, and firmly remind them that humanity was no longer part of galactic civilization. "We understand that you are facing challenges," he would say. "We wish you success in solving them. However, humanity will continue to respect the Council's decision to maintain separation between our species and galactic civilization." Some Council members suggested offering humanity massive compensation to return and help restore galactic stability. Others proposed formal apologies and promises of better treatment. A few even suggested giving humans special status that would make them immune to future council votes. All of these proposals were rejected by humanity with the same polite finality. Ambassador Deho, now elderly but still serving as humanity's primary diplomatic representative, sent the Council a message that ended any hope of negotiation. The Council made a democratic decision based on careful consideration of humanity's impact on galactic civilization, he wrote. Humanity accepted that decision and has acted accordingly. We have built a new life beyond the galactic rim and have no desire to return to our previous role. We will not rejoin galactic civilization unless formally invited by unanimous consent of all Council members. The phrase, unanimous consent, was a death sentence for any hope of human return. Several species had been completely destroyed by the cascading failures following human withdrawal. Others had collapsed into primitive tribalism. The Council membership that had once numbered 47 was now barely 20 functional governments. Getting unanimous consent from the survivors would be difficult enough. Getting unanimous consent when the destroyed civilizations couldn't vote at all was impossible. The galaxy had demanded that humans leave them alone. Now humanity was going to respect that demand forever, regardless of how much the galaxy regretted making it. The remaining Council members could only watch helplessly as their civilization continued to crumble, knowing that the solution to their problems was living peacefully beyond the galactic rim, completely uninterested in coming back to clean up the me 5 years after humanity's departure. The Galactic Council chamber sat nearly empty. The once grand assembly hall that had housed representatives from 47 different species now echoed with the voices of only 18 survivors. The others had fallen to war, plague, economic collapse, or the simple inability to maintain technological civilization without human support. Elder Quindas, one of the few original Council members still alive, looked around the vast empty space and felt the weight of what they had lost. The seats where human representatives had once sat quietly were covered in dust. The translation equipment that had once carried human voices to every corner of the galaxy had been shut down to save power. The very air felt thinner somehow, as if the chamber itself was slowly dying. Archivist Ji-Hoon Koo had left behind complete records of human involvement in galactic affairs when his people departed. These archives had become the most studied documents in the galaxy, as surviving species tried desperately to understand how much humanity had actually contributed to their civilization. Every page revealed another way that humans had quietly held their society together. The records were devastating in their thoroughness. They documented millions of small interventions that had prevented disasters, solved problems, and maintained the delicate balance between competing species. Human doctors had prevented 17 different plagues from becoming galactic catastrophes. Human engineers had designed the infrastructure that kept space stations functioning safely. Human diplomats had mediated thousands of disputes before they could escalate into wars. But most shocking were the predictions. Human analysts had identified every single problem that was now destroying galactic civilization. They had written detailed reports about the potential consequences of their withdrawal, filed neat projections about infrastructure failures, economic collapse, and social breakdown. They had tried to warn the Council about what would happen if humanity left. The Council had dismissed those warnings as threats and manipulation. Now they read like prophecies written by oracles who could see the future with perfect clarity. Emergency response. Chief Sujin Bei had created disaster relief protocols that were being studied with religious intensity by the few surviving civilizations. When the Turonian system faced a stellar flare crisis that threatened to cook their homeworld, desperate engineers tried to follow her evacuation procedures. But Sujin's protocols assumed the presence of human intuition, human adaptability, and human willingness to take calculated risks to save lives. The Turonian evacuation became a nightmare of bureaucratic delays and procedural confusion. By the time the alien authorities finished their safety reviews and impact assessments, the stellar flare had already sterilized 2 of their colony worlds. 40 million beings died because nobody could make decisions with the speed and confidence that Sujin would have shown. The destroyer swarms had consumed 12 species and were now less than 50, light years from the galactic core. Every military force that faced them was destroyed, despite having access to detailed documentation of human defensive strategies. Xenobiologist Woojin Park had been developing countermeasures against the swarms, based on behavioral patterns that only humans seemed capable of recognizing. His research notes filled thousands of pages with observations about swarm reproduction cycles, territorial instincts, and vulnerability windows. But alien scientists couldn't understand the intuitive leaps that had led him to his conclusions. They had the data, but not the insights. They could see what Wu Jin had observed, but couldn't comprehend what it meant. The swarms continued their advance toward the heart of galactic civilization, and nobody knew how to stop them. The ancient defensive lines that had protected the core worlds for millennia were crumbling without human strategic guidance. Cultural fragmentation was tearing apart what remained of galactic society. Cultural Exchange Director Narration had fostered understanding between incompatible species for decades, creating programs that helped different civilizations find common ground. Despite fundamental philosophical differences, her cultural bridges had allowed species with completely different values, religions, and social structures to work together peacefully. Without those bridges, the galaxy became increasingly fragmented. Species that had coexisted peacefully for centuries now viewed each other with suspicion and hostility. The Crystalline Consortium accused the Voidborn Collective of religious extremism. The Altarian colonies blamed the Nexian Empire for their economic problems. Ancient prejudices that Nari had helped overcome began reasserting themselves with renewed violence. The few remaining trade relationships were strained by mutual distrust and cultural misunderstanding. Diplomatic meetings ended in confusion and offense because nobody understood how to communicate across species barriers without human mediators. To explain each culture's perspective to the others, Elder Quinda stood before the nearly empty council chamber and spoke words that would be recorded as the official end of galactic unity. We believed we were removing a threat to our civilization. Instead, we severed the heart that kept our civilization alive. We thought we were protecting ourselves from human interference. We did not realize that human interference was the only thing holding us together. Economic Reconstruction Specialist Kyung Ho published the final human assessment of galactic civilization from humanity's new home in the Andromeda Galaxy. The report was transmitted to the Council archives as a gift from humanity to their former neighbors. A clinical, precise analysis of exactly why galactic civilization was collapsing and how long it would take to recover. The report was devastating in its scientific detachment. Kyung Ho analyzed the economic data with the same professional calm that he might use to study an interesting historical disaster. He calculated that the galaxy would require between 2 and 5 centuries to redevelop the technological and social infrastructure that humanity had provided. Some critical capabilities might never be recovered if the current collapse continued for more than another decade. But perhaps most damning was humanity's continued silence about the growing crisis. They made no effort to gloat about their vindication or to remind the galaxy of their warnings. They simply continued building their new civilization beyond the galactic rim with quiet efficiency. From their new worlds in Andromeda, humans lived in apparent harmony with dozens of refugee species who had begged to join them rather than face the collapse of galactic civilization. These refugees brought tales of human generosity and competence that made the galaxy's treatment of humanity seem even more tragic. Ambassador Dai Ho, now serving as humanity's elder statesman in his final years, refused all council entreaties for assistance with the same dignity he had shown during the original vote. When desperate alien ambassadors begged him to send help to stop the destroyer swarms, he listened politely and replied with devastating kindness. "We respect your sovereignty and your right to solve your own problems," he would say. The council voted for separation because they believed humanity interfered too much with natural processes. "We are honoring that decision by allowing galactic civilization to develop without our interference." When alien leaders offered humanity entire star systems as payment for medical assistance during the latest plague outbreak, Daeho declined with gracious sympathy. "We understand your difficulties, but we cannot violate the principle of separation that the council established. You have capable physicians and adequate resources. We have confidence in your ability to find solutions." The few remaining council members could only watch through their telescopes as human space blazed with innovation, prosperity, and hope. Long-range sensors showed human worlds that seemed like paradise compared to the struggling colonies of the old galaxy. Human technology continued advancing at incredible speed, developing capabilities that made their former galactic neighbors seem primitive by comparison. Colony Director Minzo John oversaw worlds where humans lived in harmony with refugee species from 40 different civilizations. These refugees reported that humans treated them as equals, shared technology freely, and helped them adapt to advanced civilization with the same patient kindness that humans had once shown to the entire galaxy. The contrast was heartbreaking. In Andromeda, humanity was creating the kind of peaceful, prosperous, cooperative civilization that the Galactic Council had once dreamed of achieving. Meanwhile, the old galaxy continued its slide toward barbarism and chaos. Historian Jun Sik Yang transmitted humanity's final gift to their former galactic home, a complete historical record of human involvement in galactic affairs. The data package contained detailed documentation of every human contribution to galactic civilization, along with careful analysis of how those contributions had prevented countless disasters over the past century. The historical record ended with a simple statement that would echo through the ages. Humanity learned that some decisions cannot be undone, some bridges cannot be rebuilt, and some trust once broken echoes forever in the SIS they had been blame.